morning, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Um, Welcome to another episode of The Turning Point. We have so much to talk about. And sorry for the delay. We were waiting for some people to start commenting and join. Hopefully they can all participate in the conversation. We have so much to talk about, so we're going to get into it. But I'm not going to lie, I'm a little frustrated with some of the comments that have been happening on X. And XRP Lion made a very interesting video where he called me openly a paid influencer. And I'm trying to be very professional about this, and we're going to discuss it. And of course, everything else that's happening in the market meltdown. But I do want to start by making one thing clear. Raising critical questions is not the same as endorsing them or endorsing the systems and the solutions that are being discussed. And I think we need to get that through our heads and a lot of our listeners out there. It's very unfortunate in this space. We see a lot of people who purely rely on terminology to misinterpret a message that's being said, as if words actually define the meaning behind the message. And that's the kind of thing that in this space, I think, exposes how naive and very detached people are from the deeper realities at play. And I'm not here to promote CBDCs. Those who actually know me know I'm against it. I've talked about central bank digital currencies in the past, and all the ramifications it has for liberties and personal freedoms. UBI or any specific tool of the system, we can call it whatever you want. But if we're going to have a very honest conversation about where the world in general is heading, financially, socially, spiritually, I think it's important for us to be able to ask the hard questions without people distorting the intent behind them. And it's really this exact inability which I think separates the analysis from the endorsement that allows people to continue living in this fantasy world where they like to hide behind these buzzwords. People have called me black pill or even white pill. And let's be real, there's no such thing as a black pill. That's just another term created by these very same people so they can avoid confronting the truth that is very uncomfortable. And I understand that. It's easier to cling to abstractions than accept the vulnerabilities and the complexities behind the truth and face reality. But that's what the truth is. We are in the middle of some very systemic transformations in the world, and whether people like it or not. And here's the real question regarding the CBDCs. Here we go. Nobody has ever raised this question. How exactly do you envision 7.5 billion people, many of them, remember, are unbanked or living under the unstable fiat systems that we were even living under very recently? And I think you have to ask the question, how are these people going to survive in a digital economy without some kind of unit of account? If currencies are collapsing or beginning to hyperinflate, how do they transact? How do they participate in the world that's already moving into a tokenized system, smart contracts, and AI-assisted platforms? So you could dismiss CBDCs all you want. I've done the same too. But at least I think it's important to raise the question and offer a real solution, alternative answer in response to that. Because just saying that they're never going to happen without addressing how billions of people are going to actually be included in the digital systems is intellectually very lazy. That's my opinion. And let's be honest, I think most of those 7 billion people out there, they are, not aware of cryptocurrencies. They don't have access to it sometimes. Most of them don't even have access to a basic wallet, let alone a secure way to store crypto. And even in the crypto community, the percentage of people who are actually invested is extremely small. My brother has talked about this many times. And a tiny fraction of that is involved in XRP and other utility-driven protocols. And even a smaller portion of that 1% of XRP holders knows actually how to secure their wealth. So again, how do you address the global population getting included without some kind of framework for digital monetary structure? These are the right questions. That's the point of the question I'm asking. Not because I want it to happen, but because I see where the system is already being pushed into. And this is not random direction. Again, we've talked about this so many times. It's a very multifaceted, coordinated psychological operation that I think is playing out across many economic transitions, geopolitical conflicts, environmental narratives, and even spiritual manipulation. So it's not just financial. There are big changes happening to us at the fundamental level. And I think this is where it gets crazy, because you got people out there saying, trust the plan, like it's a strategy, right? But those are the people who take anonymous posts, anonymous X accounts, Mr. Poole and other people, like teddy bears by a castle or a fire, castle meme coins. Are you seriously going to address that from that instead of looking at the documented facts that are out there? So what plan exactly is the population trusting? I'm not talking about us. Where nothing happens and everyone's still broke? So again, raising the question, how do you envision 7.5 billion people out there to transact with digital currencies in a digital system without some unit of account? And now focusing on that unit of account, what are you going to call it? Stablecoin, CBDC, UBI? I don't give a shit what people call it. The truth is it's still digital currencies, right? So there is going to be some form of monetary unit account for everybody else out there. And that's the importance of raising the question. That's all. It's not because I'm for it. And you guys who follow me from the beginning, I've always told people about both sides. All right. These are some of the changes we're experiencing. And, I think it's an important question to raise. So, for XRP Lion to say I'm a paid influencer for CBDCs has nothing to do with it. That's not the reality. I wish I was getting paid. In fact, that's why I have my courses, because I'm not getting paid. In fact, I'll throw this out there for those who follow me on Instagram from 2022 and 2023. I actually posted stories of emails from BitTrue, Binance, KuCoin, asking me and incentivizing me to actually put these things out there, okay? And promote these pump and dumps. I've been offered so much Tether before in the past, and I have completely denied them and declined them, these offers. So, it's just people in the space, I think, as they have these convictions that they believe in, I too have convictions that I believe in. And I study the facts. I don't listen to anonymous posts. And I followed the riddles in the past. And I'll tell you one thing, you just keep going in circles. So there's a lot going on in the world. And I think it's important to focus on the facts and not just buy into some of the narratives, because if you want real freedom, you have to ask the right questions. And I think just people blindly following the narratives without questioning the reality behind them, it means you're not paying attention. And that's it. Sorry for taking the intro of this conversation, but it's important because I am not a paid influencer. And those who follow my work, I have talked about so many different things. And I don't influence people to buy XRP. I keep addressing XRP because when you begin to do the research, you start to realize that Ripple seems to be at the center of this. And Ripple, every digital trace comes back to Ripple. And if not Ripple, it's Stellar. And I can promise you that. So, I had this guy on my channel before, XRP Lion, and I have so much respect for him as a friend. But if you go back and watch the video, he didn't answer any of my questions. I had to answer the question for the audience, if you remember that. So I don't know what to say. I don't want to be rude about it, but yeah, it's just very insulting behavior.
Well, I was in the show when he came here. We had the live conversation with XRP Lion. Honestly, I think he's coming after the wrong people. There should be better ways of passing his message across the board other than calling Versana a paid influencer. For example, I haven't watched the video. You said he made a video about it or something like that. But I think that's very shameful. He could better, if he wanted to address something, just send a private message to you. You guys have been communicating. I also spoke to him in the past via emails, via DMs on X, so I think he's not doing a great service. That being said, we have predicted a lot of the events that are happening in the crypto space right now. And first, it's my second live streaming today. I was talking to Versam before, so I say to him, today you need to take over the conversation. It's 9 p.m. my time. It has been very exhausting. I had consulting sessions and I had been following the markets a lot. I live in a different time zone, so that's kind of a challenge, but I'll do my best today. And I would like to start asking Versen a question because we didn't have a lot of time to speak on the phone rather than just what topics we would be talking about, but we didn't discuss openly what's happening with the markets. And I would love to hear his opinion, given the fact that we can call this already a market crash for many assets. If you take Ethereum, for instance, has crashed 70%, we can call it a crash, right? If we take Bitcoin, for instance, is trading at the same levels prior to Trump's election, it's also crashed 30%. We are more fortunate with XRP. If we look the chart, still trading at 190 at the moment we are doing this live streaming, and we all know that most of our audience, they accumulated XRP for 50 cents, so it's not looking that bad for XRP. But if people watch our live streamings, and I have done at least 5 videos on this subject, and we have been few of the people on this space who took into account the macro scenario. And I did a post about this today, how 99% of XRP technical analysis was 100% wrong. And that's why you can't draw arbitrary lines on a chart and pretend that you can predict the future. I have said support levels are real, but you can't draw just lines on an imaginary chart and say, look, that's what's going to happen to XRP's price. Meanwhile, we have seen that pressure on the bonds market. We have seen that credit card delinquencies are actually at new all-time highs, and the economic situation keeps getting worse and worse. The volume was extremely low on the overall crypto markets. Do you guys remember how many times me and Versan, and I think David was here as well, and Vandal, we opened the chart on TradingView and we show the volume. Even for XRP, I have raised some red flags, but mostly for Bitcoin, the volume was 500% lower than the previous all-time high. That was $69,000. And translating that to the markets, that was an indicator that we had less participants on the markets and very low liquidity. So it was very easy to artificially inflate the price, hence why when Bitcoin was above $100, you could see that mainstream media was basically dispirited to find exit liquidity. Remember, they were sending all the articles about Donald Trump joining the Bitcoin convention. And I remember we were doing live streamings there and we were saying, it really feels that a major correction is coming. When mainstream media starts to do so much propaganda, they were basically setting the stage for financial institutions to pull out their profits because they couldn't just sell marketplace. There was not enough buy orders in the markets. That's how it works. And they wanted to sell for the highest possible price. Therefore, they pulled a big mainstream campaign, and that involves Michael Saylor as well, with all his appearances to mainstream television. And that was quite obvious that we're about to face a correction. And for most digital assets, they didn't even have a major bull run. Take all the tokens built on top of Ethereum. I would argue that 85 to 90% of cryptos didn't have a bull run. We sometimes can forget about it because we are mostly focused on the ones that had, fortunate enough, the XRPs, the XLMs, Velo, SHX. Well, many of the utility coins were the best performing tokens on this bull run. Meanwhile, the entire ERC20 ecosystem is vanished. And I asked the question a long time ago, where is going to come all the liquidity to recover most of the crypto charts? Hence, the President of the United States has launched his own meme coin, which has contributed for further dilution on the crypto market. So you have a low volume environment. You have too many excessive coins being launched on a daily basis. The result is what we are witnessing right now. So I would not say that tariffs are the only cause of what's happening to the markets. That is an agglomerate of things that most technical analysts simply left out of the equation. And I think we have been doing a very great job. What do you think, Versan?
Yeah. First of all, I think, some people, again, take the terminology and misinterpret the message. First thing we should clarify is that when you say predict, Edo, and I want to clarify this for the audience, I don't believe in predictions. I believe if you do the research and understand the mechanisms behind how things are playing out, you can, in some sense, not predict, but foresee how things will play out, And that's really what we try to do here. A lot of our conversations and research takes place off record. You guys don't actually see that stuff. I'm 24/7 buried in research. And if I'm not doing my research, I promise you, I'm doing sessions. I'm always trying to contribute value. And again, that's why we have our courses at blackswan.io. blackswancapitalist.io. I got to make sure I clarify that. So to answer your question, Edo, and when it comes to XRP, I said this in the past, I don't think people need to let price fluctuations, ruin their confidence in the technology itself. What I have displayed here is by Gregory Mannarino. It's called the Mannarino Market Risk Indicator. And this indicates how much risk is associated in the market with how much debt is being squeezed. So the first thing I'm looking at when I saw the markets begin to tank, first of all, I didn't even panic. And that's because I understand those mechanisms. Now, understanding this market meltdown, what is this? This is a credit crunch in real time. It's not just a normal market dip. It's an example of the early signs of a liquidity squeeze. Now, I don't think we're in full crisis mode yet, but this is exactly what a preview would look like if the credit markets begin to seize up. And the real driver behind the bleeding equities in crypto and other risk assets is the credit markets. So while most are looking at charts and technicals, as you described, the smart money is watching one thing, and that's the debt market. So for those who do not follow Gregory Mannarino, he's somebody I really look up to. He's a straight shooter, and he was my original mentor when I began understanding how this all plays out and how it functions. So I encourage everyone to give him a follow. So this is market stress and market contagion. The tariffs is just one narrative, and believe me, with the whole tariff thing, there's so many multifaceted, layered, contributing factors to why these tariffs are there. It's not necessarily to accelerate de-dollarization, not only to level out the playing field as far as trade and bringing back manufacturing and jobs and so forth. These are some important things, of course, but there are more macro things as well. But it will accelerate de-dollarization. I promise you that, as stablecoin regulation and RLUSD, that's, again, a whole different discussion. So you have to understand that the stock market and the crypto market actually derive their value directly from the debt market. That's what we're looking at here. Everything feeds off liquidity. So when the debt market gets tight, liquidity begins to evaporate. That's exit. That's what you see when markets start to come down. And you can think of it as like oxygen being sucked out of the room. And the fire that can't burn without it. And that's really what a credit crunch looks like. And the systemic risks that follow shortly after are loans stop to flow. That means capital begins to dry up, and even blue chip companies, these are zombie companies, you might have heard of them before, they start selling off. And it's not because of some bad earnings report or short-term news cycle, it's systemic again. And you can imagine this exact setup without central banks stepping in to prop it up. No debt monetization, no asset purchases, no rate cuts, nothing. Then you'd start to see the whole system begin to collapse overnight. Not in slow motion, but instantly. You could see a 30-40% drop, which would actually be conservative to the reality of the situation. And the only reason we haven't actually seen this is because central banks are indeed still playing the backstop, okay? There are people in the space, this goes back to my first statement with XRP Lion and other people out there who say central banks are neutered. That is not fucking true. That is not true. There's a lot of nonsense going out there, and it's all been digitized, okay? So Trump, this ties us into where we're going now. Trump recently, remember, he put that executive order in place to refinance the debt. That is the signal behind one of the things to not just lower the interest rate, but also to send the signal to the Federal Reserve. And I'm serious about this. Many people will disagree. I get it. That's fine. I'm not here to impress people or prove anything to people. These are the facts. And when Trump signed that executive order talking about refinancing the debt, most people, again, miss the bigger picture. It's not about saving money on interest. It's a quiet admission that the only path forward is to printing more money, more liquidity injections, more artificial support. And ironically, this is where it gets interesting. That is the signal for institutional players are watching for. It's an entry point to pump the markets again. And this is how they also widen the wealth gap, buy low when retail is scared, inflate the markets with printed money, and extract profits while they still can, while everyone is just trying to survive inflation. And sorry to take up so much time, but moving forward too, the case for XRP is very interesting. Many people keep sending me emails about why is the XRP price coming down? And I'm happy to explain this. The XRP is going to be affected for now too, because it's still coupled with these markets. And as we've seen, It moves with Bitcoin, it moves with other speculative assets. And that's simply because the market structure is still built around the speculative flows. I hope that makes sense. And remember, it's largely pegged to Tether. And Tether is one of the most unaddressed risks in the whole crypto market and in the banking sector. And that's the difference. See, XRP is not just another token, it's actual infrastructure. We're not there yet. The volatility, again, does not shake my confidence in the technology because the end game has always been about decoupling XRP from everything else. And that only happens, in my opinion. Now, this is speculation, but so far we've been proven correct. This will only happen, the decoupling, when 100% regulatory clarity is there and not just talked about, but enforced. And we're already starting to see this come into motion, right? And when that happens, what do you think is going to happen to Tether? Tether is going to get exposed, and they can't survive full transparency because of the nefarious involvement they've been involved in. And when it collapses, and it will at some point, maybe not now, everything that's pegged to it will go away. And that's what Brad Garlinghouse was referring to when he says, we don't need all these cryptos, they'll all go away. Even Jed McCaleb has said this. There's a short on my YouTube video where Jed McCaleb said, we need one common language. He's talking about RippleNet. That is the infrastructure, the distributed ledger technology to which everything is being built upon, complementary to, bridge to. That's where I wrote the paper about the XRP XLM reset framework. And when you start to look at this, it's not speculative. There are real conversations that need to be happening over there about this complementary relationship, because when you start to see the foundation behind all of this, and I've studied this stuff for years, guys, I really have. Many of you have too, and I'm telling you, this is why it matters. XRP is still considered at the highest levels of finance to be settlement for cross-border liquidity for institutions. Many people will debate this and argue it. I don't give a shit. These are the facts. We can change it maybe later. If there are regulations that can allow us to state that, that's yet to be seen. I'm not speculating about the future. I'm talking about now. XLM, if you look at the infrastructure behind it, is meant for microfinance. That's lightweight transfers. That's retail. That's businesses. And together, I think those are the rails for the financial reset. It's not just a monetary shift, but a transformation of how money moves value at the institutional level and at the retail level. So I'll stop there, and I have a lot more to say about the banking sector as well.
I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about the banking sector, Versan.
Oh,
and
God.
I'm also happy that you are directing the conversation today. I am about to have like a burnout of so much trading that I have done today, yesterday, so many posts I did on X. Well, I was trying to connect with the audience. I did a live stream alone today afternoon as well. I wish you were there, by the way. And I think it really comes down to pass the message. I think people are wondering, like, what should I do next? And I don't want to come here and give financial advice, very far away from that. I just want to share my strategy, and perhaps you want to share yours as well. But what I have been doing the past months and on my private conversations with Versan, we spoke a lot about this, and also here on the turning point, eventually we gave you some hints. So I have reduced the amount of coins that I was holding. I came when Bitcoin was about 107,000, and I really came to the realization that the volume was so low and something was off. I have took some time to analyze my portfolio, and I started to shrink my portfolio. So I started to sell. I am full time into crypto, so I was holding about 15 to 20 cryptocurrencies. And what I have done, I started to cut them. So I sold all of the noise, all the things that were built. I had some quants. I sold my quants. I had some coins built on top of Ethereum. I sold them out as well. And I started to focus on the infrastructure of the financial system, not only XRP, but today my diversification is quite small. So I decided to stick to the more important ones. I mean, I am honest, I am not a multi-millionaire that can afford to have 20 coins with a solid investment on each other. So I decided to really focus on the most important ones. So I came down to the XRPs, the XLMs, the VILOs, the SHXs, the XDCs. Well, these are the main five in my perspective. And basically, throughout the last years, I was building a massive cash position for my standards. Not that I have like $10 million in cash, but for what I consider to be a significant cash position. And right now I am prepared for both scenarios. So in case XRP is going to drop further, which it can happen, it's a lot of uncertainty on the markets right now. Guess what? I have some cash sitting on the sidelines, and I also intend to buy more Velo. I also intend to buy more SHX. And in case it goes up again, it bounces back from this, well, I am prepared for either cases. And I think it really comes down to eliminate the unnecessary coins from your portfolio, because as I said before, I think 90%, or if we're gonna take Brad Garlinghouse words, perhaps 99% of crypto will never make a comeback. I think this cycle marks a significant change from what was considered to be speculation to what has real world utility. And I think we are right now at the intersection, and we're going to look back and we're going to say that is where we draw the line. And if you look for the charts, they don't lie. The only best performing assets right now are the utility ones. So I'm also looking forward, Versen, to hear what's your strategy right now. You think we're gonna, and again, we're not giving financial advice. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you guys tomorrow XRP is gonna be back above $2 or we're gonna go for 160. I really don't know. And I want to hear, Versen, how are you preparing yourself? I think the audience wants to know.
I mean, I've been prepared for a while. I mean, even remember when I took profits in SHX and Velo, and I'm sorry, I didn't, it's not my responsibility to tell you guys, hey, go sell. Everyone's financial situation is a bit different, right? But for a whole year, I was telling people to buy SHX and Velo at a time. And remember, these are technologies that have strong fundamentals and also what you're looking for, cheap price, okay? So when people look at like XRP when it was at 20 cents and then it hit $3, I remember getting a lot of comments and emails and people were saying, I wish I bought more, I wish I bought more. Well, Velo and SHX have strong fundamentals. They are technologies that I can tell you right now are going to be integrated into the financial system. I have documents on X and physical documents from the IMF, the World Bank, and what was it? Unfortunately, the Gates Foundation, okay? And again, people say that he's been taken out. Well, why is the Gates Foundation is putting out this content recently? And, you know, it doesn't make sense. So again, a lot of questions on that side of the aisle I'm not going to get into. But they have strong fundamentals. So when you were investing in these things at those cheap prices while not having to sacrifice your core positions when XRP did hit $3, and again, I don't focus on these very small fluctuations. I really don't care in the markets anymore like this. I was able to take, told my audience about 87,000 in profit, 40 something thousand here, 40 something thousand here with some change. I did pay taxes on that, by the way, before this whole executive order on no crypto tax. I don't know if it's legit or not. I don't really care. I still paid the tax just to be safe. And I got cash. I got into physical assets. So that's what I was encouraging people to do a year ago. And right now, my strategy is simple. I have my core positions in these technologies. Everything is on cold storage because of the systemic risk. We'll tie that into the banking sector here in a minute. And remember what happened with FTX. Your exchanges are vulnerable. They are arms for the big banks and financial institutions, the KYC and whatnot. And those regulatory standards are tightening, by the way. I have a lot of people who can't access crypto in some countries, in the UK specifically, and even in Australia, they're dealing with this. So it's very sad. You know, in the US, we do have that leeway to still position ourselves accordingly. So don't waste any time. But as far as a strategy with the markets the way they are right now, we were always expecting this. This is all a credit crunch, and we can tie it again into the banking sector, but you need to have some cash on hand, despite the fact it's not working for you, because if there was a real liquidity crisis, it would result in a credit freeze. And that's what Jim Rickards talks about, the ICE 9 scenario. And eventually, I think we're still going to get there, which is going to accelerate the reset. And, you know, Trump, I'm sure he's involved in this too, to a degree, in accelerating the reset. That's what everyone looks up to him as a savior. I understand. But if something like that were to happen, you're going to need some cash in the short term. And I think it's very important. And I always emphasize the importance of physical assets. You need gold and silver as continuation of devaluation of fiat currencies and purchasing power. You're going to see gold continue to rise. Gold did take a small dip, but that's because it's tied to the markets to a degree. But you're going to see overall, there's distortions in the market. And that's what creates this delusion of grandeur, whether one asset is pegged to another and it's not. So you should have some physical cash. You need some gold and silver. And of course, being positioned in these digital technologies, building the infrastructure, but stored away because of the uncertainty. So that's so far my strategy. And if we see some more market corrections, and I follow the bond market very closely and the credit markets, if credit starts to tighten, then yes, you're going to see more corrections. You're going to see a lower price in the markets. If the credit markets start to loosen up and debt is pushed out, you're going to start to see the markets go up. So either way, for those out there, it's not a bad idea to buy some, but I'm everyone's situation is a bit different. If you have money to lose, then yes, I would buy some more. It's an opportunity. But for those who are taking money and gambling it for their rent or for their bills, your electric bill, that's not smart. Then you just hold and wait. So people have to be very careful. I don't think we can afford to fuck this up. We really can't. And that's the sad reality of it. We can't afford to make mistakes. And I'm paying, again, very close attention to the whole banking system right now. And, it's crazy. We can't forget, even the banks are under pressure because of the 2020 lockdowns, which triggered something massive, and that's the commercial real estate bubble. Office space and traditional work environments are upended overnight. And now the ripple effects, no pun intended, are starting to hit the banks who financed all of that. Empty buildings with no revenue means default risk. So we're going to see defaults rise regardless if they pump more money into the system or not. Eventually, we're going to see defaults rise. We're going to see central banks hit their limits. And that's what a lot of people refer to as the central banks can't fix the problem as we move closer to a real liquidity crisis, one that isn't just financial, but systemic throughout the whole world. And I think when the banks do get hit, lending and standards will tighten. That means more people and businesses can't afford to access credit. And people and businesses are going to struggle. They're going to have to sell their businesses for lower prices. You're going to see more margin calls, and the cycle continues to repeat. And this is where it gets interesting, though. The inevitability of a liquidity crisis, and then tying that to XRP's role. In my opinion, since 2021, I've been saying that when a true liquidity crisis arrives, and it will, I think governments and institutions aren't just going to need a Band-Aid this time. They're going to need a real-time scalable liquidity solution. And I think that's where XRP is going to actually decouple. Regulatory enforcement will be there. It's going to decouple, and it's going to have to hit a very high price when the system resets, because the value has to move quickly, has to move efficiently across borders. And the demand for such a liquidity crisis globally, think about it, will have to explode the price of XRP, not just because of the technology currently positioned for that role at that scale, which is already in motion and in place, but I think they're going to have no choice but to use it. And that's going to require XRP to rise in price to meet that institutional demand. And I don't think this is hype. I think that's how it's going to play out over time. And I may be wrong, but so far for the last few years, our analysis has been spot on, which has resulted to opening many doors for my brother and I in this space with some of the most important people, I think, in finance.
Great analogy, Versan. I think someone is asking me an interesting question. What is the deepest bottom possible for XRP in the next 2 months? And I want to answer that one because it's not about how low XRP will go, but it's about your strategy to profit from this opportunity. So from my perspective, what I have been doing, I set up the levels that I would like to acquire XRP, and I leave buy orders on the exchanges, because as you can see, sometimes the dips are very, very short-lived. Today we had 161. It was the bottom for XRP, and that was less than 5 minutes. So most likely people were or sleeping, or they didn't. They were not online. So in case you had the buy order on that level, but it's not based on technical analysis, I think we can see all the way down to 120. I think I give that a 30% chance of happening. And if you want to be prepared, just set some buy orders so you're not going to miss the opportunity. And by the way, if you truly understand XRP's potential and what Versan said, now we are entering a liquidity crisis on the system. And if we see the two main assets both by Ripple and Stellar. And if you read the papers of both Ripple and Stellar, they are telling us that XRP and XLM are designed for a liquidity crisis. So it really doesn't matter if you're going to buy at 160, 130, 170. If you truly understand XRP's potential, and that's the beauty of holding digital assets like XRPs, because even if there's a correction, you can sleep just fine at night. And that has been the case for myself in the last 4 years that I have been accumulating XRP. At some point, I remember buying at 70 cents, it was back at 40 cents. And then suddenly we have this major rally in 2025, which just proves that sometimes just accumulating such assets like XRP, time always will give you the right to buy at whatever price you just want. If I have said this in my previous videos, even if XRP is at $10, I would probably be buying more XRP at that point. Maybe not in the same amounts as I am buying now, but I intend to just continuously accumulate XRP, and that's just my strategy. Now, another thing I would like to address today, there has been a lot of market manipulation again. So, not sure if you have seen Versan, but they came out with the news that the Trump tariffs would be lifted for 60 days, and that was fake news. And that has actually moved the markets in both directions, liquidating longs, liquidating shorts, causing a lot of uncertainty. And one thing that has been speculated as well, and I think this one might be true or not, I didn't have time to research. Someone in the comments can help me out, and perhaps Silverson. It was said that the Fed has set an emergency meeting to cut the rates. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, Versan, and what are the consequences. As we know, one direct consequence is perhaps to trigger more inflation, but I don't see a choice for the Fed right now. What do you think is going to happen?
There is no choice. But then again, we can go back to when Trump signed that executive order to refinance the debt. Got very little to no media coverage, very interesting, yet the policies around the border and some of the other things got massive attention, which will also tied us into the whole cloud pivot strategy from the Biden administration. So I'm sure they would get a lot of notoriety and publicity because those were some of the big narratives around the getting Trump in office. Okay. But the more important things like refinancing the debt, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but like the real Epstein files and the scapegoats behind that stuff. And, Anthony Fauci, he just made a statement the other day saying there's going to be a respiratory virus. My question is, why is this guy still walking around? Anyways, so yes, lowering interest rates is the signal inevitably that he's giving to the Federal Reserve. Okay. Eventually, I do agree with the rest of the Q community and these patriots that there is going to be a point where, all these central banks and financial institutions are most likely going to become licensees of the Treasury Department and so forth. But they're going to certainly in the short term print more money. And that is certainly going to be injecting liquidity into the system that depends on perpetual debt. And that's how it's going to implode on itself, right? So it's the end game on either side, the way you want to look at this. But in the short term, this certainly, when you pump money into the economy and print all this money, it devalues the purchasing power of every other dollar already in existence and in circulation. So that's why you see inflation. There's no such thing as inflation. It's a monetary phenomenon that is a direct result of printing money. And also, when you look at commodities and you start to price that in dollars for how much dollars we're issuing debt, yeah, you're going to at some point see these prices of gold and silver and other commodities go through all-time highs. And what's interesting is that also transitions into the whole LME and the COMEX, which are about to hit a brick wall. And that's why you see a lot of gold repatriation at the central bank level. At the same time, you're also seeing the gold price has been manipulated. We can already confirm this, but I think where this is all going, and I've been saying this for years, is that you're going to have regulatory frameworks for asset-backed digital currencies. And that's where I believe gold and silver and all these other metals are going to be in some way, form, fashion, pegged relation to digital currencies. And that's what's going to create that level playing field, a stable, and that's in the word alone, stable coins, right? Stability. That's where you're going to see all this kind of go into. So, they're going to pump money into the system, and that's going to certainly make the market go up. What is this? Give me a second. I'm sorry. I'm reading a comment. Why acknowledge the Q people? Stop it. It makes you look bad. I don't think it makes me look bad. I'm acknowledging it because these are the people who are putting out negative rumors about me. That's why. You don't think I should defend myself? At least put the point out there. So please, that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. I'm going to defend myself if somebody's saying I'm a paid influencer. I can promise you one thing. I am not paid. I have turned down so many opportunities because I don't want to deceive people. I'm in this to protect my loved ones, my family. I'm trying to make money as well, just like all of you guys. But that's why I mentioned the whole Q movement, okay? Because these are the people who keep calling me a black pill. And I'm just facing the facts and the reality. And that's why they call me a black pill. They want to hide behind fantasies and a bear in a castle and other things. I mean, it's just really retarded, in my opinion. And this is where some people get their facts from. In my opinion, you're not getting any news when you're covering X posts, in my opinion. Some of these guys have real insight. Most of them don't. They don't offer perspective. They don't offer facts. They just use bold characters, emojis, and things to lure you in. I don't do that. And that's why my tweets don't get a lot of attention, because they're factual. Anyways, to your question, Ido, yes, they're going to pump money into the system. And if you're positioned in the right place at the right time, you're going to make money. And if you're not, you're going to miss out. And that raises the question again to what I said in the beginning. For real freedom, we have to ask the right questions. And what are other people going to do out there for a unit of account, right? If not XRP and not XLM, something else, right? It's going to be what, a CBDC? Maybe not. Okay, maybe it's the terminology people don't like, but what, a UBI? You want to call it that? A stable coin? Well, effectively, a stable coin works just like a CBDC. I wrote a paper about this, an article, got no attention because it's true. And that's the reality of it. So anyways, I think I'm good.
Makes sense. And just to complement on what you're saying, a lot of people that decided to attack us are just some people making. I had someone, I will not even mention his name, made an entire YouTube video against myself. Meanwhile, he has not even one time shown his face to the camera. And I think you guys know who I am talking about, but I'm not gonna give them engagement for no reason. I mean,
You're
it's
talking
just
about
funny that what they do is come to the screen and read articles and make videos reading the articles and with arbitrary lines on the charts as well. Well, I'll not talk about this, but I think I have something interesting on the screen, and that's about Michael Saylor leverage purchases of Bitcoin. So he proceeded to take a lot of corporate debt, and at some point he has to pay that debt. His average purchasing value of Bitcoin is about $67,000. In other words, if we have perhaps a 15% drop, I would argue right now it's less than 15%. How much is Bitcoin right now? It's 79. So a 15% drop would throw Michael Saylor under the bus. Basically, MicroStrategy would be on red. And I have done also a video about this, that the sharks are coming for Saylor. So there are only two possibilities. Either he's an infiltrated agent from the government, and I also want to hear your take on that one. Maybe he's a psyop. I was doing some research, and there is very few information about Michael Saylor when he was a teenager, and perhaps he was there to misguide the masses into going all into Bitcoin. And right now the result is there. There is a very tiny line between a visionary CEO and a lunatic leveraged buying actually Bitcoin with someone else's money, which eventually he has to pay that debt. So I would like to hear your take on that person. Do you think he's just a psyop, or he's just trying to break his own records from the dot-com bubble where he lost millions of dollars in just a couple of days?
It's getting to a point where, we can't even discern what's real and what isn't anymore. And that's kind of nerve-wracking. It really is. It's scary. I had a client yesterday and I was talking to him, and believe me, I explained everything I could to him in the best way I could, and provided him with facts and certain things. But it's getting weirder every day. And it's starting to look like, yes, a lot of these people are certainly incentivized. We can confirm this. I talked about Mark Moss last time and the experience we had with him. There were some people who even left DMs saying that they reached out to Mark Moss, and he was just very defensive when we were talking about other technologies that are being adopted, and not really wanting to address the reality of certain things that are happening in the economy, right? And Michael Saylor, you could certainly confirm that he is a psyop to a degree, and we'll define psyop in a different way this time, because every day he's pumping it. He said, "Go sell your organs for Bitcoin." Go. He told people. I remember this happened like maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, but he told people to go leverage their home on Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin tanked. Imagine, you're on mute, Edo, but imagine if people actually took that advice and how dangerous it is. And also, we can even tie this into the whole Tether banking sector. The only thing propping Bitcoin up, and I assure you this, I have done so much research into it, is Tether's unbacked printing press. It's the only thing holding Bitcoin up. That's exactly why now they're talking about building another stable coin, and they're having these discussions about we don't have to be compliant. What do you mean, right? So these are questions we need to ask. We really do. So yes, I certainly believe Lael Hemper, whatever her name was, Natalie Burnell, she was on my friend's show, Andy Schekman. She couldn't even answer the real questions, and she just kept giving the same nuances that these Bitcoin people keep providing. And it's very funny in a sense. It's something like what we do here, but if you do the research and not just buy into the whole Bitcoin narrative, you really begin to see that Ripple does play a real role in the system, and Stellar too. When you look at Bitcoin, central banks are certainly not buying Bitcoin. Central banks are certainly not using the Bitcoin technology. Institutions certainly have Bitcoin products like ETFs, and ETFs has historically been used to captivate the public attention and bring the public's wealth into that ecosystem. And if you look at the traditional ETFs, they have been a way to siphon wealth from the poor, from the middle class. So, it raises all kinds of questions. And then, of course, the Bitcoin flag we can always talk about and go back to. Somebody said in here is the whole Satoshi thing. What logical investor is going to invest in a technology where you don't know anything behind whoever put it together? What if Satoshi is still out there, whether it's central intelligence agencies, and not to mention the white paper originated directly from the NSA? That's a red flag, guys. I'm sorry. These are the same people who put the Patriot Act in motion after 9/11. And 9/11 is another rabbit hole we can go to that supported just going to war when there were no weapons of mass destruction. This is CIA related. This is Five Eyes intelligence agencies behind this stuff. I mean, the rabbit hole goes so deep. So yes, Edo, I do think certain people are put in place and incentivized, whether they know it or not is irrelevant, what they're being told to do or pushed to do, but they're profiting and siphoning wealth. Because if you look at what happened with Bitcoin recently, I noticed some Bitcoin holders, and we talked to Matthew about this off record, and believe me, this was an incredible interview, but off record was more astounding. This guy's wisdom is just out there. And he was telling us, and we talked about this briefly on record, how these Bitcoin maxis were incentivizing people, taking profits to incentivize the use of Bitcoin and pushing it out there. And again, the marketing that goes into it, that's a red flag. People were putting their money in Bitcoin. Bitcoin would go up, and again, artificially inflated through Tether's unbacked printing press, which creates the illusion of volume trading. And what were they doing? They were then dropping the market. So they've stolen all the money that people were incentivized to go put in there. And then what did they do? They took that money and they went and bought gold, physical gold. So they're stealing profits from the middle class to go buy hard assets for themselves. And governments are doing this too. I mean, that's how deep it goes. So again, this is why I always go back to emphasizing the importance of physical gold, physical silver. These are real tangible assets, and there will be a relationship and an intersection with blockchain technology through stablecoins in the near future. So be on both sides, right? But Certainly, Bitcoin, even if you put $100,000 in Bitcoin, and let's say Bitcoin did go to 250 or 300,000, think about the profit margin you're going to make compared to something that has a real use case that is not being talked about but being adopted, like Velo and SHX at 0.017 cents. That's an example, right? Or XRP, even HBAR, which is essentially Ethereum 2.0. So, it's risk ratio reward that I think new investors who are coming into the space now, as this is becoming widely accepted and adopted, need to think about. And that's why you should be following the right people in this space. Otherwise, you're going to be misled. And technical analysis is not going to do shit.
I totally agree, Versan. We have to look for the technology, and Bitcoin is clearly not the chosen technology for the financial system. And there has been so many things going on that we didn't even have the time to comment. Not sure if you have seen this that I have displayed on the screen, but it's very interesting that Tether CEO, it's called Paolo Ardoino. I think he's Italian, by the way, for his name, and he has me blocked on X. However, he has said that Tether will not try to make USDT comply with the new US laws. So basically, they are just saying that Tether is going to be out of the United States as well. It's already out of Europe. So right now, it imposes the question, what's going to happen when Tether is out of business on the United States, which is its major markets, by the way? What's going to be the effect on Bitcoin? And I totally agree with you that the time for life-changing gains with Bitcoin is over a long time ago. And I stake my reputation at risk for this because I have been saying that for a long time. When Bitcoin was $70,000, we have said so many times that the upwards potential for XRP was far greater than Bitcoin. You had an asset with real world utility at 50 cents, 70 cents. Meanwhile, you had Bitcoin at $70,000. And well, history has shown that we were 100% correct. Mm-hmm. And right now, for what I see, the circle is closing. We have MicroStrategy, which owns about 500 million Bitcoins. It's a huge percentage of the supply if you stop to think about it. And people used to say, but XRP is centralized. And meanwhile, XRPs are secured in escrow, preventing things like being liquidated for corporate debt, which is exactly what's happening with Michael Saylor if we have another 15 or 20% drop from current levels. Meanwhile, USDT is currently probably running out of business in the United States. I'm not sure if you had heard about this news, Versan.
Yeah, a few things. First of all, somebody made a comment asking me, Versan, do you hold a little Bitcoin? I'm not going to lie to you guys, and I've said this before, that I do get paid every now and then in Bitcoin through Ledger. We do have, if you go to our description, that's like the only thing we get paid for is through Ledger, affiliate link, it's called, where we encourage people to do cold storage. So they do pay us in Bitcoin. They don't give us the alternative to accept XRP. So we have no choice. But when Bitcoin gets sent in, by the way, it takes 8 days to get into my account. Can you believe that? And I don't think it's because of the Bitcoin ledger. Even if we were getting another currency, it would probably still take 8 days for processing. But it's funny how these same institutions are taking 5 to 6 days to move something that's supposed to move in like 3 to 5 seconds or even 10 minutes, right? So that's kind of ironic, but we do get paid in Bitcoin every now and then through Ledger affiliate only, and we do convert it into other assets. And then somebody else mentioned Bitcoin wrapped on XRPL solves all its technological issues. I have publicly addressed that in the past, and he's correct. I think Steve has a point there. I said in the past that if Bitcoin was to reach its full potential that some people have speculated about, $1 million example, it's going to have to rely and depend on the cross-border functionality, which it doesn't have, the liquidity provision for such a high price, which it doesn't have at this moment. In fact, there are videos of Brad Garlinghouse openly, and I think I have this on one of my videos, my older ones from 2022, where Brad Garlinghouse openly said, and he was questioned, haven't you bailed out a Bitcoin exchange? And he's like, many of them, because they didn't have the liquidity and they're still attacking us. That's what he said. I'm not even kidding, something like that. And that's why I put it in the video. But yes, if Bitcoin was to adopt the technology, which is RippleNet, XRP, having that use case over there, then it would have the cross-border functionality, the liquidity provision, and the scalability aspect, which means Bitcoin can survive, essentially. That's the reality behind how Bitcoin could potentially reach something like that.
In other words, only if they tokenize Bitcoin on the XRP ledger, that's the only outcome where I see Bitcoin somehow surviving or thriving in the next years to come. And by the way, we just reached 55 minutes, so it's perhaps time to wrap up, get on some final thoughts. We have almost 4,000 people watching live, and I want to send a special thanks to the audience. What do you want to leave your last message for today, Versen? I am closing up because I promised today it's 9:30 p.m. my time, and when markets were moving yesterday, it was like 3-4 a.m. here for me, and it has been a lot of emotions. But most importantly, it's okay to have adrenaline, but in the other hand, knowing that I have XRP in a cold wallet makes me more relaxed. So it's kind of the counterfeit for the market fluctuations. And that's what I recommend for everyone, to not only focus. Perhaps some of you are traders like myself. Trade is a revenue for me, but I don't recommend everyone to trade. I actually mostly recommend spots. And if you just hold spot, you should be fine. You should be focusing on the long term. Zoom out the chart, you see that everything still looks fine. XRP is right now $1.90, and I mean, most of us just bought it at 50 cents, 20 cents, 70 cents.
18.
And I bought I am lucky to say this, that my largest XRP purchase at once was completed at 16 cents and a half. It was when I was moving from Portugal to Greece.
Yeah.
1 week, in the same week, the SEC lawsuit came out. But anyways, I think not everybody got the possibility to buy below 20 cents, but still they bought at 50 cents. I know people bought at 70 cents. A lot of people also were able to take profits, which is great as well. I don't see nothing wrong with taking profits, but always secure your long-term holdings for the future. You must have, like, I became like divided. I have one bag that is in my cold wallets. I don't even know how much I have that. Honestly, I don't even measure that in US dollars. And that bag doesn't stress me. Now, the others that I have on exchanges, and every time I see the fluctuations in price, and one day I am up 5,000, the other day I am down 7,000, that causes me more stress. But knowing that I have secured my position, that I am comfortable in a cold wallet, makes me also more comfortable by trading and by taking some risks, because I know if everything goes bad, I have my safe 80% holding, 90% that is sitting in cold wallets, and I think that's a solid strategy.
Yeah.
Now, we are fortunate, and I say this in the beginning of the live, that we invested in XRP, also XLM, and the ones that we always spoke, because they are just the best performing assets. I would not be wanting to be on the skin of someone who went all in Bitcoin when it was $70,000 5 months ago, and right now you are sitting basically almost in a loss if you account inflation, or perhaps you decided to buy Ethereum at 4K. Imagine how you would be feeling right now. So I consider the XRP holders to be extremely fortunate. Don't take this as lucky, but you deserve it. You made the research. Everyone that I know, everyone that follow us, is still sitting in a lot of profit. So I think we have to be focusing on the long term, and we should not be worried about the price fluctuations. And I think that's how we're going to thrive on the long term. There's some final thoughts, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is a long-term game. It always has been. And, it's really something Steve pointed out also. I mean, Steve has been putting some good thoughts in here, and I like that. See, I try to get a lot of perspective from others. That contributes to research and everything we're trying to do here together. But Steve mentioned that he's not bullish, and I'm trying to quote him. He's not bullish until regulatory clarity is there. And he has a point. It's really regulations that's going to bring the legitimacy of the technology, hence the institutional adoption, which is already, I think, in motion. But why is it the price move? That's the question people always come back to. But it's going to be that regulatory clarity, which is now beginning to come out as far as the narrative. The Trump administration signed an executive order to accelerate stablecoin regulations and the frameworks and asset classification. That is so important. We know that XRP is not a secure. Sorry, I'm reading the comments. Okay. But Steve made a very good point there, and I am personally bullish, but I'm not bullish until regulatory clarity is there too. It's the only thing that's going to bring, again, that institutional legitimacy behind the technology. And when institutional legitimacy there, you're going to see money flow into this stuff. And that's what's also going to kind of pump the price up. And that's, again, just a micro perspective I would have. But the macro perspective is some of the more pressure on the financial system, including the dollar, now the evolution of the dollar from RLUSD and many other things we can get into another time. So, I mean, there's just so much information out there. But yes, long term, I'm bullish. Short term, I think everybody needs to have some cash, despite the fact that you might not agree with me. I think you need some physical cash, not inside the bank. Okay. If it's in the bank, just like crypto, it's not yours. All right. They're going to lend that money to people who need it, who are defaulting on their debt because they made bad decisions. You don't have to suffer for that. So get your money out while you can. Leave a little bit in there to pay your bills. Carry most of your cash, invest it in hard assets, get food and water, because I hate to say this, despite the fact that we talked about the tariffs very briefly, tariffs, despite what people believe, are going to result in higher inflation in the short term. The pain. That's even what the Treasury Secretary said the other day. Short term, all right? So you're going to see the price of goods and services kind of go up. Spoke to a friend yesterday, asked her, the prices of groceries. She went to HEB, and I'll tell you one thing: the prices have went up. So, just be mindful of that. Get some food and water cheaper before it costs more. Have some cash on hand. Invest in hard assets, and keep your digital investments aside on the cold storage. People keep asking, what cold storage? The ledger is still good, despite what people have said in the past. I did my research on there. There was nothing there. It's just for clicks. The other thing, for security, have multiple hardware wallets. That's what I do. I have 8 hardware wallets. I use 6 of them. My crypto is split into all of them in a Faraday bag with cash, with gold, and a copy of my passport. You never know. You might have to leave. So I'm a bit excessive like that, but that's my...
If you leave this, and I can host you here in Greece. There is a nice couch in my living room. Gonna be happy to have you here in case you need to leave.
Yeah. I mean, and another thing, final thought is people keep asking about these other technologies, XCN, Trez. Trezor is a good wallet, by the way, but personally, I have the Descent and the Ledger. I have multiple of them. I also do have a Keep Key, which I have very little crypto on that. But when people ask me about these other technologies, like, what do you think about XCN? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Listen, I've said this so many times, but I see use cases and value in some of these protocols. Not all of them. Most of them, I think, are not going to make it, but some of them. And when I look at them, I see value, but I don't give a shit. The reason why is because I'm more invested in the technologies that are disrupting the payment service, because that's where the money is. So basically, my return on investment, I think, is going to be potentially higher investing in the technologies that are actually causing the disruptions, instead of investing in technologies that are going to be contributing to that disruption. You see what I'm saying? Gaming is a big sector, for instance. Sandbox. Remember, we talked about this last time. Sandbox had opportunity. I still chose not to put my money in there, even though I knew it was going to go up, and it went up. Remember, Edo? Told you about it.
Yeah, you gave me a call. I went on leverage. I went with a long position. I made good money on that one.
I didn't make any money on it because, again, I just told you I wanted to invest in the technologies that are disrupting payments for long term. So it all depends on your risk ratio reward again. I think more long term, and I'm positioned at a point where I'm very comfortable. I sleep good at night because I have cash, physical assets, gold, silver, investments for the future. But I have taken the steps necessary to protect myself, no matter how the outcome evolves. And that's how you survive, I think, in this space. And again, we can't afford to make mistakes. So I hope this was valuable. And again, to XRP Lion, if he heard my intro, and I'm sorry, that's how I feel, I encourage him to call me. I told him multiple times to call me. He hasn't called me in the past. So, if you want to talk about that, we can discuss it on the phone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to see you next Monday. Done.
Yeah. Take care.